right, good afternoon. Welcome to the Corning Museum of Glass hot glass demonstration. This is a special demonstration. We have guest artist Denise Stillwaggon Leone, and she's going to be here. She's made a piece. It's a complicated technique. We'll get into it a little bit later. Yeah, you can give her a big round of applause. She's here doing the demonstration with us here at the amphitheater, and then she's also teaching a class over at the studio. Making the piece today for Denise is Eric Meek, and we have Jamie Perrian who will be assisting them. My name is Catherine. I'll be assisting you, narrating throughout the process. If you have any questions, shout them right out. And Denise has also got a mic, so if you have any questions for Denise, and she's probably going to explain a little bit about the ways she works with this material as well. If you can turn it on.
Okay, so what we're making is a graal, and Eric already prepared a blank for you, which is looks like a big football or like a big egg, and inside in the core it's white. Pardon? And on the outside of that, there's a big space of clear glass, a big gather of clear glass, maybe an inch, and then on the very outside, there's a beautiful red, a coral red, and a black flash. So what I've done is I've taken that blank and made a photo stencil, which is a special way of making a sandblasting stencil using light-sensitive material. And we have a couple of sketches of the original artwork, which is very unsophisticated, I might add. But to show you what my intentions were with this beautiful blank. And so what I hope to do is literally to sandblast through to the red, which is under the black, and then sandblast off some of the red to get to the white. And it was my intention to remind everybody that our coral reefs are declining and they're bleaching out. So although I would love this red, I just want to remind everybody that we're having difficulties with our coral reefs. So I take a light-sensitive material, I contact it to this, and then where the image is black, that protects the emulsion of the light-sensitive material. And I go, after I've exposed it to UV light, I wash it out, and then it leaves this pattern, which you'll see on the graal blank. Okay, do I have any questions?
It's a very difficult technique, but that's why we're here. We're going to demonstrate the technique. Actually, Denise has already done the hard work. Now we're just going to pick this up and inflate. Eric's going to do the hard work. So this graal, she was actually explaining this, and I was like, Eric drew a beautiful drawing of the graal. So this is what's inside the oven. This is what Denise has put the artwork on. So the coral reef, and we saw this earlier. It's actually in the oven. It's about 1,000 degrees, right? It should be, yeah, 1,084 degrees. And so like she said, we have the white layer in here, correct? The white layer. This is all clear glass. This is a big, thick area of clear glass. And then a little bit of a thin layer of red. And then is there black over it?
There's black over the red.
And there's a thin layer of black over that. And so she placed this, it's kind of like a big sticker almost.
Right, it's really a stencil. And most of the black imagery most of the black glass is protected. But where it's not and where the stencil is open, you're able to sandblast off or literally etch off the black to get through to the red, and then to further blast it to get through the red to the white. So you're creating an image that's in layers, basically. And in the blowing process, what's beautiful about a graal is that it might start out as this very small and little detailed image, but as the glass blower takes it and blows it out, it really transforms into something much more beautiful and interesting than what I did, really. Eric is the magician here, so.
So Eric's creating a post. This is a collar that we'll pick that graal up on. And it's a pretty big graal. It's about this big. So it's a nice big bubble. He might gather over it.
I think he's going to gather over it, and it probably will be a much bigger thing than it is right now. But behind that exterior, or that what you're seeing is a lot of glass. So he has a lot of glass to work with, and I think that you'll see that's very interesting, the process and how it evolves.
Yeah, it's a big thick bubble. It's just got this little tiny bubble inside, and so that'll allow that.
So he's making a collar, right?
Yeah.
He's making a collar, and he's going to connect that donut of glass right to the nice flat top of that piece, and then connect them, and then be able to work further with that piece because of the connection. Okay?
So we blew the bubble. We let it cool in an annealing oven. Denise took it to the cold shop and sandblasted through the color. And then she brought it back over. We put it in the oven, brought it up to 1,000 degrees very slowly so it didn't get too hot too quickly, which would cause thermal shock, causing it to crack and break. So slowly it came up in this oven right here. And it's kind of sitting in there just like this. So the bottom is resting on the bottom of the oven, and the bubble is open here at the top. And so Eric's blown through that blow-pipe, so it's just basically a big straw at this point, and that clear glass is going to allow him to stick. Hot glass is sticky. He can stick it right to this bubble, and then he'll pull it out, and we've got the color pattern. It looks fairly simple, but there's a lot of work that's already gone into this. Yeah. Or is it time? Okay. It's time. So this is the oven. Jamie's going to open the oven. Eric's going to go in and stick the graal up. We're going to turn off this oven just so it's not, the temperature difference isn't too great. So he takes the graal out of the 1,000-degree oven and puts it into the 2,000-degree oven. It's not going to be as much of a shock. So there's the graal. Into the oven. We just turned the gas off so it's not too hot. There's not flames shooting on the graal. But you can actually see it on the inside of that oven. There's a camera right behind the oven. It's not a special camera, but a special window in the back of that oven. But you'll be able to see what's going on inside when Eric's reheating. So since we are live streaming, we do have a cameraman on here on stage with us. So you're going to get some really amazing shots tonight of this detail that Denise has put on the glass. So we've just turned the oven back on. You might have heard that kick on. Now I can hear those burners keeping that oven at 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. So you've been working over at the studio the past week and a half, working with your students?
Yeah, I've been teaching at the studio, which is right across the parking lot. It's part of the museum. It's a wonderful glass school, which draws artists from internationally. I mean, I don't live far away. I live in central New York, but many of the teachers come from Australia, Japan, I mean, you name it. It's a very, very diverse community of artists. And the studio is so beautifully equipped and designed that it really is a draw. I mean, it doesn't really compare. There are other glass access studios, but this studio is amazingly equipped, and it's a really fun place to teach. I've just finished a class in which I had 6 students and a wonderful TA, Kat Burns, who's up here. And it's been an amazing time. I mean, you're thrown into this sort of little pot with people that you've never met before, with people that have all different kinds of approaches to art and glass art. And we just have had a wonderful experience learning, not only me teaching them, but me learning from them. So it's a great place to study.
So I'm going to try to work some of the texture out of that.
It's okay. I'll just hold it up.
So Eric was just letting us know he's going to melt out a little bit of this texture. So when the process of gathering glass, you go into a big pot in the side of the furnace, a big ceramic crucible that holds about 1,000, in this case, about 1,000 pounds of glass. And if there's any little indentations or little ripples in the glass, it's going to trap a bubble. And so he wants to really smooth that out. So when Denise did the sandblasting, it actually created a little
An indentation.
indentation. Yeah.
So, and those grooves are pretty deep, you know, they're not superficial. So I think that's what Eric's trying to do, is minimize the texture so that he doesn't trap lots of air. Although, you know, because it's a coral motif, a few bubbles wouldn't bother me at all. So,
Yeah, some people have a real problem with bubbles in glass, and I always think it's a nice.
yeah.
It shows that it is fluid and it does have those bubbles in it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's hard to see for you, even on the screen, is that inside that black surface, there's this beautiful coral red color. So once this is cool, that will be more apparent, but maybe not so apparent right now.
No, it'll be a nice liver brown.
And you can always come back tomorrow and see it finished, right?
Yeah, that's the best part. You got your tickets are good for tomorrow. You're maybe still here in Corning. You can come see this piece. Sometimes I don't know if this would be the case for this piece, but sometimes they do take a picture of the piece and post on the museum's social media.
Oh, that would be
So
nice.
maybe that's
Yeah,
something we could do,
That'd be
yeah.
great.
Yeah, she'll be doing that. She's
Okay, great.
documenting the
Great.
process, and then once the piece is cooled, that's the hardest part about glassmaking in the hot form is you finish the piece and you're so excited to see it and you have to wait sometimes 2 or 3 days, but most of the time overnight, depending on the size of the piece. Question?
Actually, if the question was the first time it came out black and then it came out orange the second time, and you know, he's exposing it to a lot more intense heat in the glory hole, and so the piece, the glass is literally holding temperature and it's changing color, and that's what happens, and it's very hard to see the color changes, and I think that's why Catherine was just saying, check in tomorrow on social media and see the finished piece. But I think what you're seeing is heat, more heat being evident on the piece. Is that the correct way to say that, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what you're seeing is the heat. That's it. That's black glass. And what you'll see as it starts to look darker and darker is the temperature. So you really get to see and then when he touches it with the paper, that'll cool the glass off quite a bit. So anytime you touch the glass or manipulate the glass, now he's even blowing on it with compressed air, you can really see that beautiful pattern. It'll cool the glass off. Black will look black when it's cold, around 1,000 degrees. The red, like Denise was saying, is going to look pretty brown, and you won't see any of that coral red until tomorrow morning. But it's going to be a beautiful, just like this bowl here. It'll brighten right up once it's at room temperature.
I think you can see a little bit of it on the up there.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, I can see a little bit, not enough, but it is a beautiful color. It's called coral red. So, do I have any more questions?
And I think as you inflate it a little bit, you might be able to see a little bit of that thin layer of white as well.
Right, I'm hoping.
Or no, that's behind it.
The white is behind it, but I think you should be able to see some reflection from the core, the white core.
Yep. So now we're just letting this cool. Eric's going to go back into the furnace and gather another layer of glass on top of this. And actually, you won't be able to see what's going on inside that furnace. So we have, I don't know, can we do that during the live stream?
What?
Yeah? Can we play that animation of what actually happens inside the furnace? Because unless you're gathering yourself, you're not able to see what's going on inside that oven. So there it is. There's the furnace. And there's a big ceramic crucible inside the furnace. It holds about 1,000 pounds of clear molten glass. He'll dip the bubble down into the surface, and keeping the pipe turning in one direction allows him to gather it up. You might have seen it drip or trail off, and then he pulls it out of the... So that was an excellent animation that the museum has provided. If you want to see that again, it's on, you can find it on our YouTube channel, the Corning Museum of Glass YouTube channel, so you can check that out again. And it's really important for this to cool off. If he goes
Catherine,
in...
oops, sorry.
Yeah, you got it.
I was just going to say before we gather on this, we're trying to strike a balance here because I want to get the texture out of there. But the black on the surface, it's really soft, and as I heat it more and more, it's sort of bleeding the sandblasted area closed. And so I'm not going to completely get rid of that texture. I'm just going to have to try to gather really carefully and try to minimize the bubbles that we trap in this. So we're literally dipping into a pool of glass, and the way to minimize bubbles is to not turn fast as you're going into the glass, because it will lap over on itself and trap bubbles. So I'm going to try to go in slowly and just kind of go in one direction without turning so much, and hopefully we won't get so many bubbles. Even though you don't mind them, we're still going to try to make them look as good as we can.
You get a really nice view of that. And it is just like you wanted in the, I can see that she wanted the white sort of up at the tips and the red. It's starting to look like that a little bit as well.
So this will eventually be the top of the vessel up here, and this will be the bottom. So if you're looking at this wondering if it's upside down, it isn't. You just have to orient yourself. This will eventually be the top of the vessel. We're making kind of a form, a taller vase form. It actually sort of mimics the shape of this. It'll be wider at the shoulders and more tapered to the bottom.
So a question we get asked all the time is, do these pipes get hot? And they certainly do. And so right now he's cooling the pipe off. This is called a pipe cooler. It's just a trough of cold water. And we just turn the pipe in there. And he'll be able to probably touch the pipe closer and get a nice good grip on the glass. Now when he gathers over it, it might become hot again. So you might see him come out of the furnace with the fresh gather and come right to this pipe cooler to cool the pipe off. They're made of stainless steel. It's a fairly poor conductor of heat, but they certainly do get nice and hot right up there where we're gathering. So you can see he's slowly pushing it down into that pot. See, that's what we see. Until you get the glass down into the molten glass, you don't really see anything but that bright light. Look at this. We can tell you that glass will drip off the pipe all day long, but until you see that right there, it's kind of hard to believe. We call that a strip gather. Isn't that neat? Now the water is probably, you can see the light is just coming out of that bucket. The water is boiling. And the color has changed quite a bit. And like we said, that's just the heat. Yeah. So Eric's going to go sit down at the bench. I'm going to bring this over to him so he can get some of the things ready. He's got a big cherry wood block. We like to use cherry wood because it has a dense grain pattern and a low resin content. And that'll just allow him to shape the glass Now, as the narrator, I usually have to ask, people ask, how heavy is that piece? Well, I got to actually lift the pipe, and I can tell you it's very heavy. The pipe itself probably weighs about 10 pounds, and he's got a good amount of glass on there. I would say over 10 pounds of glass on the end of the pipe, and it's going to feel much heavier today than it will tomorrow because you're holding it away from your center of gravity and it's moving a little bit. So it's going to feel much heavier. So in the class that you taught this past 2 weeks, are you making, I read that maybe you were doing some decals?
In our class, we work on a variety of ways of making imagery, not only in flat glass, but in hot glass. So one of the collaborative projects we did this week is we gave Nancy Callan, who was teaching the blowing class, a decal which was made by a printing process, and it prints glass and ceramic so that the actual ink is not like printer's ink. It's basically ceramic ink, and it can withstand very high temperatures. So we applied some of these decals to hot glass, and Nancy blew out a really beautiful bottle. We also do all kinds of sandblasting and filling with enamels, and we do painting on glass, trying to come up with a variety of ways of creating imagery in glass, not only for hot glass, but for flat glass as well. Alex was teaching with Nancy this week in the hot shop at the studio, and this is Corey. They're experts, and they've come over to work on our team with us.
Yeah, this is a nice big piece, so it's gonna help. It's gonna be nice to have a couple extra hands. With a big piece like this, you need someone to help turn, maybe do some heats for Eric, because it is gonna be a pretty heavy piece. They're gonna be working on it for a long time. Now you can see we've got one. Corey's turning the pipe. Jamie is shielding Eric's arm. And Alex was just standing by, ready to blow into the end of the pipe to inflate the bubble. So remember, this graal had that little bubble inside. And so now that they've gathered over this and we've got everything ready to go, it's time to start inflating the piece. And so that's what's going to happen here. Awesome. Corey brought his muscles to lift this big glass around.
Corey and Alex, you can tell that they haven't been working, basically 12 hours a day blowing glass. They just can't stop. So thank them very much for coming over to help us. It's awesome.
Yeah. I think for glass blowers, sitting in the crowd watching people blow glass is probably the hardest thing. You just want to jump in there and help out. No?
And they know that I'm also incapable of blowing glass, so they're filling in for me.
He's cooling and shaping the glass. He just looks over to Corey. So glassmakers who don't always work together, this is a process that's pretty intuitive if you've been working with glass for many years. And so when Eric looked over to Corey, he came right, he knew what he was doing. He was waiting for someone to come lift the heavy pipe, take it to the furnace, because it needed to be brought back up to a nice working temperature. Working at the museum is, I think one of the best parts about working at the museum is being able to work with so many different glass artists. It is a team, it was very much a team effort, and in this case, a collaborative effort, which I think is one of the best parts about this material. It's not something you go to your studio and usually you work alone. You go to your studio and you've got 4 of your friends and you're making glass and there's music playing, there's fire. It's usually a good time. Did everyone have a nice time at the museum today? Yeah? We've started live streaming a lot of our demonstrations, so for those of you who are watching at home, welcome to the demonstration. Definitely check out our live stream once you leave the museum and you're not able to come back for a demonstration. You can see our cmog.org/live up on the screen. During the summer months, we get a lot of visiting professors, people who are teaching, master glassmakers who are teaching classes over at the studio. And then all of their students, so glassmakers from all over the world are coming to the museum throughout the year, but a lot during the summer. There's some extensive classes. So right now at this past 2 weeks at the studio, there was a glass blowing class. There was Denise's imagery class. There was a flame working. Emilio, he did a demonstration last week where he flame worked some birds out of, I believe, our glass, and then they stuck it to a vessel, and he created these. I don't know if the other demonstration was live streamed, but he made these figures, these flat figures, and they were almost like dancing, and they picked them up and rolled them up on a vessel. That was a really beautiful piece.
Yeah, and he also made some small crows over the torch, and they attached the crows to a beautiful red vase that I'm not sure who made that, but it was stunning.
Just Rochelle.
Yeah, the contrast between the red and the black is something that I think a lot of glass artists really like to explore. Mm-hmm. So it's very beautiful.
Yeah, it's the same coral red that you used, I believe, right?
Yeah, it is the same coral red.
He used black crows on the red vessel, and Denise has the black vase with the red coral coming through. So
and you can see now that the imagery is becoming stretched out. At the more that Eric shapes it, the more it's stretching. And I mean, that's one of the things about graal that's very compelling, is the metamorphosis of the design, the original design.
So you can see they're turning this glass. It's probably 20, everything that right there in their hands, probably 20, 30 pounds. And they're kind of turning it and carrying it around like it's nothing. They've blown it up. Jamie's doing an excellent job of shielding Eric. That glass doesn't look too hot, but I can assure you it's very hot. And his arm, the very sensitive part of his arm, is very close to that hot glass. And it's almost a distracting heat, because you have a lot of work that you need to get done in a short period of time, and when your arm is burning from the radiant heat, it's distracting from what you're doing. And so she'll jump in there with those paddles just to shield his arm. She's ready to go, shielding. She's a shielding master. So with big pieces like this, it's nice to have a big team, 3 or 4. Yeah, you can see. That's a big piece of glass, nice and heavy. So Alex is gonna blow into the pipe. He told her to blow, blow, blow. That means blow pretty hard. With other things, you wanna blow nice and soft. So if anyone made their own ornament over at the studio today, they told you to blow soft because that was a little bit of glass and the glass was very hot. And so if you blew too hard, it would get too thin too quickly. And so when you're using a little bit of glass and it's really hot and soupy, like when it would drip off the pipe, you want to blow pretty soft. But at this point, the glass isn't that soupy. It's not going to drip off the pipe anymore. It'll fall off center, but it's not that soupy material anymore. So at this point, they can blow pretty hard. So back into the oven. This unique view is brought to you by Fuse Silica. It was developed right here in Corning, New York in the 1930s. It's the same type of glass used in the space shuttle's windshields. It melts at close to 4,000 degrees, so it won't melt in the back of that 2,000 degree oven, and it won't melt as the shuttle re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. It's also the same type of glass used in the core of the optical fibers for fiber optics. So it's pure silica, nothing else added. When we use our glass, this glass that we're using is silica, soda ash, and limestone. So the soda ash reduces the silica's melting temperature to about 1800. That creates a water-soluble glass or a water glass. And so to that, we need to add a stabilizer. So in this case, it would be limestone, giving it its name, soda lime glass. These windows are soda lime glass, and you come across it more than once throughout your day, I'm sure. It's very common glass. Gravity is one of our favorite tools. We'll use it as much as possible because it won't cool the glass. It doesn't leave any tool marks on the glass. The newspaper is also, did we tell you this was newspaper in his hand? About 6 or 7 sheets of the local newspaper folded up. Crazy, isn't it? Soaked in water. Question? Why doesn't it stick? It would. The newspaper ash would stick to the glass if it became dry. The newspaper is soaked in water, and I've actually had that happen before, so that's why I know that. If the newspaper becomes dry, if you keep using the paper or use the newspaper with a really hot gather right out of the furnace and it doesn't have enough water in it, it'll stick, and the ash will leave a little bit of a residue on the surface of the glass. But if we keep that newspaper soaked in water, it rides on a thin layer of steam and carbon, so it doesn't really even touch the newspaper. But it can, if you let it get too dry. See, I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of water on there. Mostly what you see coming off of there is steam. Sometimes you see a little bit of smoke because the newspaper is so hot it'll start to burn away. The newspaper tool we replace quite often, once every other day. And not because it burns away, but because it's soaked in water and it becomes really gross. Yeah. Soggy, old, squishy newspaper. So we liked the fresh newspaper. This one was made just today. I think Dane Jack made this newspaper. Does the carbon keep it? Yeah, the carbon layer, the burnt layer will also keep it from sticking. So using a fresh newspaper, sometimes you get a little more of a resistance and a stickage. But once you get that, it's only about probably 4 layers that are burned away. So I could probably open up that newspaper and you'd see you could still read it. We've got an old one over here. Looks pretty old and ratty. But you can still read the back. So you can see it doesn't burn all the way through. It's just a few layers on the top that burn away. But you can see they do become pretty nasty. And so we'll throw those out and make a new one. Yeah. So we're going to use a fluffy torch on the top here. Eric said he wants to equalize the heat. So you can see the bottom is glowing that nice bright orange. And the top looks fairly black. So when we look at a piece of glass, we can tell the temperature by the color. When Corey goes into the furnace, he can start to see a little movement. He can also feel the weight shifting through the end of the pipe. So those are all things that we're looking for. But out here, you can see the heat from your seats, and you can tell us where the glass is hot at the tip. Why? Because that's the first part in the oven, the last part out. It's always going to be the hottest part of the piece. These are a set of corks with handles on them. They are going to flatten this vase. So a lot of times we make pretty round, symmetrical vases and pieces. This one's going to be really neat. It's going to have sort of a lollipop shape. So by using those corks, the corks are nice. They have a layer of carbon built up, and we can actually do this to the glass, whereas if we used wood or something else, it would scratch the glass. So Eric can squeeze the glass with those corks, and it won't scratch the glass at all. What do you think, Denise? Are you liking the way it's turning out?
Yeah, and I really love the flattening, the way Eric is flattening it, because it will showcase the imagery. So there's 2 stencils on this piece, and when it's flattened, it'll give you a better view of the whole image. So for me, it's like the perfect way, the perfect shape for a vessel. And Eric and I kind of talked about this before. We thought this imagery would stretch very nicely.
Yeah. Yeah, so Denise works a lot with imagery. You do a lot of architectural installations and things.
Yeah, I do both architectural installations of stained glass and sandblasted glass, and I also have been working here at the studio for almost 20 years now, teaching how to do those things, how to do sandblasting, traditional sandblasting and photo sandblasting, how to paint on glass using traditional enamels, which are made of glass, and painted on glass and fused to it. And I also combine those 2 aspects of my practice in how I teach. And I also teach fusing glass using glass powders and enameling and sandblasting. So we work in layers, and we try to make our pieces compelling because and have depth because of how the layers are developed.
Yeah, this is not something you want to YouTube and watch a video and then try it. You want to take a class and learn from the experts, because it is a very, there's a lot of steps that go into this and a lot of technique to perfect this imagery, to getting these, because you can't, go in and you can paint with enamels, but using the glass as a powder and a form of getting that imagery on there it's a lot more difficult
tricky.
than you would think it would
and
be.
it's based on imagery that you draw. I mean, it's like drawing, but only using glass as your medium. So, I mean, and that's the way I think of it. I don't think of it as complicated. I think of it as an extension of drawing. Mm-hmm. So, or mark making, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, glass is such an ancient art that there's so many ways to work with the glass. This hot forming of the glass is a very sort of quick and fluid way to work with the glass. And then there's the cold working processes where you can engrave glass. And the masters that carve, they can do portraits and carve into the glass to create beautiful imagery on the glass. And like Denise said,
It's already pretty hot, so you don't need those.
using the resist to create imagery and different things. There's so many things you can do. And once you learn one technique, it opens, I think, 10 more doors, and there's just so many more possibilities. Again, using gravity. That is a big piece of glass. Corey is kind of moving that around like it's nothing. That's a heavy piece of glass.
It's also so hot that it's moving constantly.
So it's going to feel a lot heavier than it is, yeah. It'd be like if you picked up a bowling ball and held it close to your center of gravity. It's pretty manageable. But if you picked that bowling ball up on a pipe, and the bowling ball was sort of moving on its own, and you'd have to kind of wrangle it into shape. So a lot of times we finish these large pieces, And now that Corey's been lifting this piece and he knows how heavy it is, he might come in tomorrow and take it out of the annealer, and wow, that's not as heavy as it was yesterday. It'll feel a lot lighter than it is off of the blowpipe and cold than it is right now. The pipe, like I said, the pipe itself weighs about 10 pounds. And then they've got a little bit of glass on there, which we call the moil. That's just holding the glass on the pipe. So that weight will be gone once the piece is finished as well. They're flattened the bottom. This is where the vase will rest on the table. So they'll use a few tools to make sure that this is nice and flat. And he's even given it a little kick. So it'll rest just on the outside of the foot. They want to let everything kind of cool off at this point, because now is the time where they're going to transfer the piece off of the blowpipe onto a solid rod called a punty. And so that area that Alex was just torching, that's going to get a little thermal shock to break free. And so we want that to have a little bit of heat into it. It is probably the colder part of the piece at this point. And Eric is probably going to drop a few drops of cold water on there, and we don't want it to be too cold. Otherwise, it would crack right down the side. So everything has to be just right. We call it the 3 T's of glassmaking: temperature, timing, and teamwork. So you can see we've got the team together, and everything has to be done at, what do you think of the team? They've got their timing down. They're waiting. Eric is preparing the punty, or the transfer iron. And they've got their temperatures down. They're flashing the piece, keeping it nice and warm, using the torch to heat the top. And Eric's making a punty, which is just like a big glass Q-tip. It's the shape of it. Sometimes we do a ring punty, so it wouldn't look like a Q-tip. It would look similar to that, but then the glass would create a ring at the top, and that would be for something a little different, sculpture punties. But for this one, they'll stick it down in the center of the foot, and then they'll run the 2 irons together, making sure the piece is going to be kept on the same axis. And then to remove it from the blowpipe, they create a little thermal stress right on that line he cut in earlier. So he did a little bit of prep work. He cut in that line with the jacks. And then with a very light tap, this will pop right off. So here we go. Eric will stick the punty right on center. If he doesn't, he has a few seconds to adjust. They'll run the 2 irons together. A little heat on that connection that the glass is going to break on, so it's not too much of a shock. Eric's cooling that connection. He's blowing on it. And that just removes a little bit of the heat, so it's not flopping around when he takes it. They're going to transfer the glass. So a few drops of cold water on that line, and watch this, a light tap, it pops right off, and the crowd goes wild. And now if you look up at the screen, there is a small hole. So you can start to see that from that graal, you can see the white layer on the inside. So now all that's left to do is finish up the top of the piece. Eric's going to take a set of tweezers and straighten it on the punty. Always important to make sure that this piece is still running nice and straight. And then he'll let that punty settle up so it's not moving around as much. and he uses the torch to heat just the top. So when we're not going back into the oven, we can use that fluffy torch to heat certain areas of the glass, in this case, the top. He's cleaning up his workbench. You have such little time to work with the glass, about 30 seconds really to work with the glass. And if you're kind of fishing around for your tools, you've lost a good 10 seconds of that 30 seconds. The glass has become fairly cold. So Alex is going to help him out, making sure his newspaper's soaked in water. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that's what we're here for. You go into any glass shop around the world and you get to watch and see the process, but here it's nice you get to actually have your questions answered, yeah. How does the aperture of the oven adjust? Jamie Perrion, everyone. She's there, she's got a little hook, and she opens the doors. And so when we're making a small piece, she'll keep those doors closed. But she's busy over there. We haven't even noticed her. She's opening up those doors. Does that answer your question? So we'll show you on this cold. We've got a cold oven here. We can actually open the doors and show you. So right now you can see it's a fairly small hole, be for the first gather. Jamie's opening up these doors and the larger the piece, the more you can open up. And this is our jumbo hole. If we really needed to get nice and big, we could open that all the way. We could make a nice big piece. And so the aperture changes just by opening those doors. And we like to keep all the doors closed. It's like having the AC on in the summer. We don't open up all the doors and windows. We keep them closed as much as possible. So actually, I think Jamie's already got those doors closed. They're closed right up. And then when Eric goes back in, he'll open them up. Does that answer the question? Yeah. And so when we're making these pieces, they probably talked, Denise probably told Eric what size, roughly.
We talked about size, but Eric is used to blowing very large pieces. I mean, with something this big, the potential for failure is great. I think it increases exponentially. But clearly, Eric is not afraid of a large piece. So I knew that it was going to be big when he gave me the blank that he made for this demonstration, because there was so much glass in it, meaning that he could use all that glass to actually make a large form. And the thing that surprises me is how crisp the imagery stays, even though it's been stretched maybe 3 times its original size. You're still seeing that kind of crisp and beautiful coral image. Do you have a question?
When it's done? It's not crazy thin like a goblet or this bowl here, but it's fairly thin. I would say about 1/4 of an inch.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think should be interesting when it's done is that the clear space will create a bit of distance between the outer design and the inner core of the white. And so you'll get a little bit of a shadow-like effect, which can be very beautiful. But I don't think, maybe at the bottom it will be like 1/2 inch or more. But I think up near the top it might be and you can see as he's making the neck there, you can see it's getting quite thin, maybe 3/8 of an inch right now?
Yeah, so structurally we like to keep the bottoms a little thicker, and then it'll gradually taper up into a nice, so the lip's gonna be fairly thin, but like Denise was saying, towards where that imagery is, it's not crazy thick, but definitely a thickness that you'd be able to see.
And I think you're seeing more of the imagery now. There's less heat, so it's starting to kind of come out the way we hoped it would. So, do you have any more questions?
Way up in the back. How do you value the piece?
I have no idea. To tell you the truth, I'm not sure. I'm going to leave that up to Eric. I mean, it's hard to say because there's so much work that goes into it. You know, it took me several hours to, you know, figure out the design, and then, you know, not too long to sandblast it because Eric had made such a beautiful, like eggshell thin layer for me to get through. So, you know, maybe I spent 8 hours, and you see he's spending how many? 2 hours maybe? I don't know.
And then he made the graal.
Pardon?
Probably an hour just to make the
Yes, just
the
to make. Oh,
blank.
yes, just
The
to make
blank.
just to make the blank that I started with. So, it's hard to say. Like, you know, we all spend so much time doing this. I don't think that it's our preeminent focus. But I'm sorry, I can't answer.
But a lot of things go into pricing: the color, the hours. But you can see there's four or five people right now just assisting Eric, and so that would go into pricing a piece. So that little top part at the end, that was just a handle. They've just used that to grab and stretch the glass. I believe Eric's probably going to, in a few minutes, kind of just tap that right off. And what it will leave is a nice clean opening, nice small hole. So that's garbage. Hope none of you like that too much. It's just gonna knock it on the floor. So he's actually going to cut in another line where he wants it to break. Not only are we master glass makers, but we're master glass breakers. As glass makers, we get very good at getting the glass to break exactly where we want it to by creating these thin, weak lines. So he'll pull and stretch. So if he was to remain seated there at the bench and pull that out, it would become pretty, he'd have to lean out pretty far and pull. So he's actually stepped outside the bench to pull and stretch that. Looks like they want a little more length. They want that to stretch a little further. So they're using that hot torch to just heat up that specific area. That torch runs around 3,000, 4,000 degrees. It's very similar to the torch you would use in a flame working shop. Did anyone see the flame working demonstration up in the Innovations Gallery today? Yep, very similar torch. They use the rods of glass through the torch. So he's going to pull and stretch that a little further. He's even put a glove on. People ask us all the time, why aren't you wearing gloves? You don't need them. And in this case, he does, because he's holding his hand pretty close to that glass that's hot for a pretty long time. You saw that. We wear leather gloves. Okay. Yeah, so another question was, so that little bit of glass that's holding this big heavy piece on the pipe, how come that doesn't snap right off? And that's because it's nice and warm. If that were to get too cold and Eric was, putting that torque on it, it would snap right off. No problem if it was cold. Another thing that can happen if they kind of neglect it and don't pay attention to it, it can crack. And so we would heat it with a torch, or sometimes we wrap a little bit of hot glass around it. But they're maintaining that temperature, so it is nice and warm. And what we kind of look for is a little bit of movement to make sure it's nice and hot. Once it starts to look clear, like clear glass, doesn't have that orange glow anymore, that's a good indication that we need to put a little heat on there. Yep, and if they started to hang out here any longer, they might put a little bit of torch on that punty connection, but it's a temperature-driven connection, yeah. So if it were to get too cold, it would certainly pop right off. And we know this from experience. It's happened. The piece has popped off the punty more than once in a glassmaker's career, more than we'd like to admit. True? True. That's where the glass blowers like to sit. You get a bird's eye view. It keeps them close to the heat. They can feel the heat rising. You don't want to get too cold. So they're opening up the top with the jacks and a wooden board to keep it nice and straight. This piece will, I believe it will belong to Denise. Denise, where will this piece end up? You're not sure?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
She
we didn't
would like
talk
it to-
about that.
She
so
would like it to end up in her living room.
I have a lot of glass in my house, I gotta tell you. But this one is really special to me. It's so beautiful. I just love it. I love how it's turning out. and
Yeah.
I hope you're enjoying it too.
Yeah. Yeah, so this, I believe this will belong to Denise. She can do whatever she wants with it. The pieces that we make throughout the day here at the museum, they're all given away or used for charitable donations. Sometimes we use them to bring people to the glass museum, so we place them in different areas around the area so people inquire, what is that glass piece? And then they come to the museum. So none of it's sold. None of it makes its way into the gift shop and is sold. And so at random shows throughout the day, we do a raffle. We give away most of the pieces that we do make here. So that's another fun part of this job is if we were selling glass, we'd get a list in the morning. You have to make so many blue bowls that are 10 inches wide. We'd get specific orders, but since we don't take orders, we don't sell the glass, we're able to make whatever we want. So as the glassmakers here at the museum, we get creative freedom. You can see a lot of different pieces here along the front of the stage. We come in the morning, and our boss says, just make something that's interesting. And so that's a great part of this job. It is, it's gorgeous, and it's going to change. It's going to look very different tomorrow morning once it's cooled off. That bright red coral will pop. Right, yeah, this piece is going to look nice. Don't you love these air conditioning vents? No other studio in the world air conditions their studio. But here we like to keep our glassmakers nice and happy. We like to keep our museum guests nice and happy. But who's been to Murano? Has anyone been to Murano? Have you been into an air-conditioned shop over in Murano? No. No, because what's that? You had gelato after. Yeah, that's the best part. You watch hot glass or you make hot glass and you go get some gelato. Yeah, so if the glass makers are cool and happy, the glass is not happy. Doesn't like to be cool. And so we place these, they're all along the front of the stage when the leadership team here at the museum decided they were going to build this state-of-the-art facility. They went to many different glass-making shops and said, what do you like about your shop? And so this is a state-of-the-art facility. The air conditioning in vents allows you to step away from the heat, cool off a bit. And so if we're not working, we're usually standing in front of one of those vents. Question in the back? will it hold itself up? It's on the end of a stainless steel pipe. How's it going to, when it's finished, yeah. And so what actually is going to happen is they're going to remove that punty. So the little bit of glass that's on the pipe that's holding it is going to come off pretty clean. And so they actually flattened the bottom before they puntied it. And so when they break off that punty, it'll leave a little bit of a punty scar or mark, but for the most part, that glass is just going to pop off pretty clean, and it'll rest right on that foot, yeah. Yeah. And we'll remove it from that punty. They're getting pretty close. I can hear them talking about where's this going. I can also tell because Corey's put on this beautiful silver suit and his Kevlar gloves, because it's his favorite part of the day where he gets to stick his head and arms into the 910-degree oven. So this, yeah, so Jamie's gonna check the oven. She's gonna make sure it's up to temperature. Are we good? We're good, thumbs up. So these annealing ovens, we've got many annealing ovens on either side of the stage. They're slow cooling ovens. I think if you kind of think about it, you say you're going to let this cool slowly overnight. Why not put it in a freezer? We're putting it into a 910-degree oven. A few drops of cold water on that punty connection, not the piece, just the punty, because it does crizzle and crack the glass. There's a bonking board. They're going to light tap. It pops right off. So you could see how delicate that connection was. The lightest tap set that free. There he goes. He's in the oven, in the 900-degree oven. And it's got that flat spot, so it sits right up. The oven's closed. Let's hear it for the team. Denise Stillwaggon Leone, Eric Meek, Corey, Alex, Jamie. There's nothing like a nice, big, sweaty hug.